Coffee time. Good to see you here, Sia. Been a while. God. Hello, Zayad. Hello, Toa. Switch on over. There we go. Good to see you all. Oh, wait. One thing. Hey, there we go. A little bit of light. What? Hello, Zoe. Hello, Connor. Hello, Adam. Hello, Sheila, Omar, Lily. Lovely to see you all here. Listen to Whip Wednesdays. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see you back, Sia. Hope you're doing well. Hope your job has got you settled in and all that kind of stuff. Been a while. Yeah, but welcome back. With Wednesday, our weekly review session for community feedback. I'm gonna be looking at 16 people today. Gonna be awesome. I'm excited for it. Dang it, I forgot one thing. I need to. In a little bit, I'll go grab some water because I feel like I'm gonna need it. Hello, Liz. Good to see you back. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, it's cool to see so many people hanging out here. Okay, we're gonna start this off with something that literally arrived today. I did away so badly. Okay. So it is Gamescom time. It was time for a refresher. I have something here. I've got 6 different variants of whatever that I have in my hand. And it's these awesome looking business cards for Beyond Extent, which I'm really, really happy with. Even though the one that I'm showing off has like a little lip at the top. Feel free to ignore that one. Did I literally just pick the one bad one? God dang it. Yeah, look at this. We got like a QR code with like a little bit of information on the back. We got some cool... Oh, coasters would be cool. I mean, they kind of look like coasters. It's like mini coasters, right? But these are like little business cards. And I have 6 different variations. So, that was the one. Shot glass coasters. Fucking turning into a drinking game now. So we got this one. This is from the latest team challenge. Although, like, this is the first time that I have this one also from the latest team challenge. Let me see if I can zoom into this bad boy. Yeah. I believe that this was a team that won in the realistic category as well. So I got like 600 of them printed in total, which is like freaking exciting. See, so this is another one from challenge before that one. This also has a lip. Dang it. I didn't properly check them before. Yeah, it seems like some of them have like a little lip, but this one. So, this one is from the one before that. It looks so cool. I'm so happy with them. Yeah, the reason why I got a bunch of them printed is because Gamescom is in a couple of weeks. We're gonna host our first event. Well, not our first Beyond Extent event. This is kind of like an external event that we're hosting. And Beyond Extent is sponsoring that event. So I'm super excited. That's why I got like a bunch of stuff printed. So yeah, a whole bunch of cool goodies. Well, a whole bunch of cool cards printed. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna carry all of them with us to Gamescom. I'm gonna hand a bunch of people out business cards. So if you are at Gamescom, feel free to give me a shout, and I'll happily give you like a couple of these that you can have them for yourself because they are really good quality. So I really like how they came out. So awesome. I'd buy a coaster too. Oh, I would. I would love to have a coaster. I've always loved this coaster that I have from Ubisoft, and it's like a thick plasticky one, but it just looks really nice. It would be cool if we can have one of these with like the Bionic Sin logo. Hello, Mike. Hello, Slate. Hello, Joe. Good to see you all here. But yeah, so got that printed. That was super exciting. Have a bunch of stuff coming in from our sponsors as well for the event too. Um, I will probably show pictures from the event because I don't want to spoil it. But Houdini sent us 26 kilograms of goodies for the event, which is like freaking bonkers. But that's freaking awesome. Massive shout out to them. A bunch of free stuff that we can hand out to people that are coming to the event, so that's gonna be cool. Yeah, and I mean by that time, people are gonna go home with like full bellies, with freaking drinks, and also with like a bunch of free stuff as well. So good luck getting that through airport security. We were smart about that one because one of the people that we're co-hosting it with lives in Germany. She lives quite close to Gamescom, so she's just gonna drive all that stuff up, which is awesome. So prepared for everything because yeah, oh my god. Oh yeah, getting like 26 kilograms, like even just running around with it is gonna be fucking mental. I'm not gonna do that. We can use the shot coasters. Oh god, this is taking off, right? Ugh, so jealous. Next year I will be there. Yeah, so I think next year, obviously I need to talk to the co-organizers, but everyone is freaking excited. Like everyone is kind of just like we're all like kids before Christmas, you know? Like we're getting all of our goodies delivered. Like we're getting a bunch of stuff printed. So we have like a big banner that we just got printed with like the logo for the event that we can put outside, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's starting to become real. And yeah, if yeah, if everything goes well, like I would be super excited to host another one like next year. That would be awesome. Because the only issue that I had with the event right now is because it's the first time that we're doing it, and there were so many unknowns that we couldn't really announce it like way way up front, right? So we were kind of last minute. So that meant that people that were going to Gamescom, they would be able to join, but then anyone who wanted to go to Gamescom and wanted to have like somewhat of a cheap stay in Cologne, that wasn't going to be possible. Dun-dun-dun-dun. I want to be there next year too. I'm still annoyed I just missed out on meeting up last night. Am I late? No. You are on time. On meeting up last night? Dun-dun-dun. I feel like I missed that one too. Oh, last year. Oh my god, Maddie, you got me so confused. God, that was not even last year. That was the year before, I think. I think so. Because time freaking flies, man. Oh my god. Oh no, I thought it was last year as well, but yeah, time freaking flies. The day is hyped. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. Yeah, the outreach and the amount of people that signed up was like way bigger than anyone expected. So yeah. I mean, we'll see what we can do with that for next year. We have a really good idea of what we can do for next year. It's gonna be awesome. Yes. Yeah, but it's all becoming real. Everything is like right on time, and it's just gonna be it's gonna be exciting to see like 70 people are fully booked. So like the venue is not at capacity, but like the event tickets that we have are completely sold out. So I'm really excited to see. Oh yeah, Joe, did you go to the XYZ meetup? Because yeah, I got an invitation to that one as well, but it was just, it's gonna be mental. So I couldn't make it. But yeah, I hope you had a good time. It was last weekend. It was awesome. Hey, was it like a single day thing, or was it like linked into like another event? I completely forgot. Yeah, such a fun weekend. Hell yeah. Yeah, those gatherings are always like really fun. But yeah, so that's fun. Something that is going on in the background, which is more community focused. Some people might have already seen it, is that we're doing an update to our little icons and our little roles that we have inside of the community, which is something that is long overdue. The reason why it's long overdue is because we've had multiple discussions within the team, but we also wanted to make it into like a bigger system, not just like do that we have right now. So over the next week, or over the next week or so, you're going to see updates to the roles. Maybe there's going to be some new features coming into the community. Maybe there's some rewards attached to it. I'm not going to say too much, but yeah, you'll see some changes happening within the community. And then a whole bunch of, yeah, new roles will be introduced to go along with it too, which I'm also really excited about because, yeah, I spend a lot of time designing all the new little icons, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. Yeah. What about the course? So the course has been, so we rounded off one foliage lesson. So that has been currently going through some video editing. So Sunny's doing some video editing. I'm doing some image editing for another course lesson that was rounded off like a couple of weeks ago. We're still rounding that one off. But we're making steady progress. I think what's gonna happen now is we know that the system works. So like that the system that we set up works. And now we want to go into like full production. So we're looking to get at least 4 people at the same time building lessons for the course now. So we're gonna dramatically increase the amount of lessons that are gonna be in development now. We're gonna go from like 1 to 2 to like doubling it up, and then seeing if we can go 5. So with the hopes that near the end of the year that we are gonna publish like the alpha. I'll be like 90 when you publish the course. How dare you, Syed? This shit takes time. Oh my god. It does take time. And also, like, it is just me bootstrapping the whole thing, right? So we don't have like outside investment or anything like that. So yeah, it's just, that's the major constraint right now. That's why we're also going to do like the early access and the alpha, or whatever we want to call it. So that hopefully that will give us additional funds so that we can even go quicker with the course and create. But yeah, we'll make an announcement of that like as soon as we can. But yeah, I think everything is going good. There's no real major hurdles. We're working with like a fantastic set of people, like honestly, like the people that we work with. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reveal them, right? Like that's, I'll keep that a secret until people start signing up. But it's been a real pleasure to work with those people. So it's been a long time in the making, but I'm hoping that it's all gonna pay off. Best of luck. Yeah. Thank you, Zayad. Appreciate it. Oh yeah, see, yeah, the meetup was 2 years ago. Yeah, I know. Ooh. Checked out the vid with Marijn about world building and understanding design and hierarchy is super eye-opening. Yeah, that workshop was really good. Workshop was really good. If you are interested in more of that stuff, Marin actually did a GDC talk about the world building in Diablo 4. So we were really lucky to have her. But that was on the back of a GDC presentation that she did before as well. So she was like really warmed up and gave us some like really cool additional insight. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was literally called like the world building inside of like Diablo 4 or something like that. But it was yeah, really good. I can recommend. Yeah, Tobias is saying the same thing. Hell yeah. Yeah, I always love it. I feel like we don't really have enough. We don't really have enough talks that really go into world building, right? Like how you create like a holistic world, not just like a small part of it, but like how you keep all the things consistent and how you keep things relevant and consistent over time as well, which is also like a bigger and bigger task for, well, not only environment artists, but also the narrative team and the level design team, and how that all like comes together is really interesting. But yeah, building something like that from the ground up always takes a lot of work. Just played Diablo 4 15 minutes ago. Hell yeah! It's been a while since I played. It's been a while. Maybe I should pick it up sometime. Kind of browsing around for like a game these days, so sure. Alexander Charles' videos are also super helpful in design. Yeah, he's a super nice guy as well. Like we met up in Berlin, where I think he still lives, if I'm not mistaken. We met up one time at a noodle festival, from like all things. So yeah, really, really nice guy. Yeah, it's interesting to see people in their professional environment, and then they're like, yeah, it's almost like sometimes you meet people that have like two separate personalities, right? Where I feel like some people have this attitude of like, hey, look, what would I call it? Like play hard, work hard kind of attitude, where they're like, look, if I'm working, I'm working. I don't want distractions. Then if they're like on a holiday or whatever, just like, no, I'm not thinking about work. Like I'm fully detached. An incredibly random place to meet him. Yeah. I think so yeah, I met him through a friend of mine at that point, who was also living in Berlin. And he was like, hey, we're meeting up with a bunch of people, and then I just met up with them. It was cool. It was cool. Yeah, it was a really random place. All right, give me a minute. I'm gonna go down, grab some water, and then we're gonna get started with the feedback, because we do have 16 people that we need to go through. So bear with me. I will be right back. I'll mute my mic there. All right, let's get kicking. I'm trying to be more like that, focus on work and relax like crazy. Yeah, I've always had like a terrible time relaxing. I'm trying to get better at it. But like what I'll do, and I've said this multiple times before, is I'll just do a lot of work and then maybe do like half an hour of just chilling before I go to bed, just to like wind down, so that I'm not like jazzed going into like my bed. But sometimes I'll also have like these intense, I say it like game sessions, where I'll just get so embedded into a game for like a week or two that I can't stop. thinking about the game and like playing the game. But they're few and far in between those sessions, I feel. But yeah, for people that are new to this Whip Wednesday session, it's basically where I give feedback to our Discord community. So all the people that are inside of our Discord community, they have like, we have like a little forum, and they can tag up their work, and if they want to tag up their work with Whip Wednesday, then I'll give them feedback. So that's why we're here. But I'm also more than happy to talk about anything that you might be interested in, or if you have any questions about game development, environment art, or career advice, you need to ask me anything, because I do have a little bit of experience in the myself, since I'm coming up to a decade in it now as an environment artist. So feel free to ask anything. I had that with a game called What Remains of Edith Finch. Finished it and couldn't stop thinking about it for a long time. So yeah, that is a cool game. I don't think I played a little bit of it. I think it's free right now. So maybe I should pick that up. But I had that with a with a game. Fuck, this is always so ridiculous. Power Wash Simulator, like, really just gripped me from like beginning to end, where I had so many issues letting go with it that what I did is I stayed up way too long, had like not a lot of sleep, just because I wanted to get the game done so that I could put it down again. Yeah, that's usually the mentality that I go into. May I ask a quick question about job posts? Yeah, for sure. I had motion sickness with that game for some. Oh, really? I mean, I can get it because you're doing a lot of like swiping and rotating and all that kind of stuff, right? So, just out of curiosity, when searching for environment art jobs on ArtStation or similar sites, I rarely find any listings. It is normal. I feel like ArtStation just sucks for any games now. For any game jobs, I don't look at ArtStation anymore because they don't seem to fill them in anymore. I don't know why. I have no idea. Like, LinkedIn is probably my go-to now. But there are some newer platforms that are up and coming. I've not used them myself yet, but I've been keeping my eye on sorcery.gg, which seems to have like a pretty good refresh rate when it comes to industry jobs. Even though like the URL doesn't sound like it's like anything at all, right? See, I saying Grackle HQ. Yeah, I think that's it's not used in Europe, but whenever I wanted to look up like American job openings or something like that, Grackle comes up a lot. Or even when you type it into like AI to like, I don't know, help you with a job search, like Grackle comes up. That's a good shout too. Yeah, I mean, if you in the chat have any recommendations to help other people out with job postings, feel free to drop your favorite platform in the chat. It'd be really helpful. Cool, and then let's have a look at the question from Major Tom. Does anybody know a good vertex paint tutorial? I've seen some artists bake curvature, AO, and a breakup mask into their models to use layer texture in their Unreal material. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that, but there's so many ways to set it up, right? So the way that I currently set it up is I will not do any vertex painting myself, but I use the vertex painting system to blend things, right? So I use the modeling mode, and in the modeling mode, you can actually set a you can bake stuff in your modeling mode. And I usually bake like AO. What was there? AO and curvature are the only two options, I think. And you can then feed that directly into well, you can bake that to your vertex paint, well, your vertex color, and then use that in your material setup. But yeah. So there's so many ways to do vertex paint that you kind of have to be specific, or try to be really specific with what you're searching up. Because with vertex painting, you're probably going to find a lot of tutorials that talk about like the old school vertex painting, where you have to just manually paint. Yeah, let's have a look. So Bronze Gear is the first person that we're going to be looking at. Let me put as well. Bronze Gear is working on an old window. I'm about to wrap this project up, but I'm looking for additional ideas on camera angles, detail shots, and a thumbnail. Lighting isn't quite final yet. Will be adjusted on a basis. Yeah, I just had some fun with like playing around with some ideas. So throwing around some like presentation ideas. Maybe you can do like an interior light. And I'm thinking about like a candle. I'm almost imagining like two people sitting at like a table with like a candle in the middle of the table or something like that, so that we get something inside of the room itself, and then potentially playing around with like silhouettes of people, or maybe something like this, you know, where you just have like some random Megascans junk that's inside of it to kind of fill up the interior a little bit more. You can kind of tell that it's a garage or something like that. Or maybe even doing like some quick vines on top of it. The reason why I'm thinking about those things is just to emphasize that it's really old, right? So we have like a lot of like some old dead foliage covering the whole thing. It would be pretty cool to see. And then the second thing that I wanted to point out was, especially under this ledge, just having like way more grime and dirt, because the whole thing is old. I'm expecting to see like a lot of just like moisture buildup and mossiness and like dirt just like clinging underneath like the windowsill here, because that's where a lot of water is going to be stored. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think in terms of texturing and all that kind of stuff, I'll be open and honest. I've said this before, where I'm not the best at like all that kind of stuff, right? Like I focus more on like the macro rather than the micro. Looks really good. Gav is saying normal data on Unreal Engine's what is that? On the glass? i.e. it's handmade would be nice. Normal data on the glass? Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So that it's like, it kind of has like a little bit of a wobble, right? Or like a little bit of a curve or something like that on top of it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, hi Gav. It's good to see you. I keep hearing from you through the grapevine, you know? People are moving around between companies and they're joining new companies, and yeah, so I heard you're doing well. So glad to hear it. There's been nose to the grindstone from what I can tell. But how are you doing, man? Yeah, not too much here to kind of add to the whole thing, Adam. More just like ideas for the presentation, right? Like trying to add a little bit more stuff to it, or just to elevate the presentation. Maybe even just having the bush in front, now that I'm looking at it, would be interesting instead of just having the wall, right? That is just Megascan stuff. That's all really easy to do. Yeah, cool. More interested in ideas for additional camera angles and shots and thumbnails, as mentioned in post. Yeah, honestly, I don't really have too much to say about that, because I mean, it is just a wall with a window, right? Like there's only so many ways that you can kind of capture it. Like I always gravitate towards like what we can do to add depth to the scene. So that's why I'm gravitating towards that. So yeah, can't really say too much about the camera angles. And the thumbnail, I mean, it's gonna have to be pretty straightforward, right? Like I'm almost imagining not this as a thumbnail, but just a little bit like slightly zoomed out, maybe, so that we get at least like a bit of an overview. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe you could do something like this. Maybe that would be worth pulling off for a thumbnail as well. But then, like sometimes what I'm thinking about is that if you have a detailed object in your thumbnail and then you open it up to the whole scene, then it's like, oh my god, didn't expect this, So there's kind of like a surprise element. Where in this you're not necessarily gonna have it, but it could still be nice to experiment with some like close-up shots like these ones. Because you're going for that high detail look, right? So might as well give it a try with the thumbnails as well. Yeah. So I think this one for the thumbnail could be interesting. But I don't really have that, honestly. Is it modular? I don't think so. I think this is, from as far as I can see, it's just going to be like a singular window with a focus on like the high quality texturing, right? Cool. Thank you, Adam. Great stuff, man. It's looking really nice. Looking really good. Sweet. Oh, I kind of forgot to do like a hands raised. So if we have people from the community in the chat, feel free to raise your hand and you'll be next in line. Okay, so Sergio will be first. Let me catch up with the chat. See. Environment art postings on Grackle are pretty slim, or have been. I feel like I'm seeing more recently, but it ebbs and flows. Yeah, I think honestly that's just like the nature of the industry right now, where there's just not a lot out there. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's going to be the way it is, I think. I've just got a bookmark folder full of studios and look at Indeed. Yeah, honestly, so the advice that I've been given, right? Like the advice that I've been giving to people is that anyone and their dog is looking on LinkedIn right now, right? So that is like the easiest thing to do. So everyone's going to do it. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it either, but you have to set your expectations pretty low because that's where everyone else, right? So you kind of have to go out of the way and try to find another way of jumping the queue somehow, right? So what that means is, in some cases, that means reaching out to people, right? Like try to network in like the old school way by just reaching out to people. Maybe going to networking events if they're close by and they're affordable, right? Those kind of things where you can kind of build like connections with people. Because what oftentimes happens in this industry is that people know people, and then if they know that they have like an opening coming up, they'll probably recommend people that they know are going to be good and are looking for a job, right? So communities like ours, like Dynasty, like Experience Points, like all those kind of communities are really good as well. But they're only good if you can make an impact on the people that are at a certain point going to be in a position to then help you get that job, right? Very important though. You should not be talking to people just to get a job. That is not going to work. Trust me on that one. You just want to be your genuine self, try to connect with people, do your thing, but do it in a more public way where it allows you to engage with other people as well. So for example, if you see people sitting in like a voice room, like in a voice chat on Discord, just hop in, engage with them a little bit as you're doing work, depending on how many people there are in, or how comfortable you are with that. That could be a really good strategy as well. But yeah, it's just a long way of saying you gotta think outside the box because, yeah, everyone is doing the LinkedIn game and that is really saturated, especially right now. But even in normal industry times, though I don't know what that is anymore, it was going to be saturated. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there to hopefully help some people. But let's see. So Sergio was first. Let's look. What do you got? So 2 questions really. What do you think of the modular pieces? Do they read well? I think so. Yeah. Hit the can. Okay, there we go. It just took a while. Right. Yeah, I feel like you got like a lot of variation going on. The only thing that I would be interested in potentially, if we're talking about modular pieces, is how many you're gonna need to build to create variation. For example, what I mean by that is if we look at this section here, and let's say this is just all a single modular piece, you know that that's not gonna work because if you're gonna texture it, like let's say you have like a texture here, that texture is gonna repeat on the entire module, right? So that is something to keep in mind. There's multiple ways that you can avoid that by either doing another variation or, so let's say option 1 is variations and option B would be just like a macro mask or something like that, right? Where you have your base texture and then you have like your material layering on top of that that is driven by a world mask. That would be like an in-engine way of doing variation without having to worry about like needing to make variations yourself. Obviously, this is pretty easy because you've got like all the files set up anyway. If you're gonna do all that stuff, but this is more just like the way that I love to work, where like it's mostly an engine. So that is something to keep in mind. I don't really have visibility on that, but the way that they read right now, it feels very natural. So I don't really have any complaints about that. Plus, also, like if it reads natural, if that is a checkbox, that is honestly the most important thing when it comes to a modular kit, because what happens when we make modular kits in the beginning is that we tend to forget that we need to make them look nice, right? Because we focus so much on the functionality that we lose track of how good they need to look. So if they look very natural, that is honestly already a win in my book, because any variation that we need to add on top of it is going to be easy. So yeah, really happy with that. Let's see. The second question was, currently there's no direct light on the buildings from the left side. Considering that I will be making some artificial lights near the windows as in the concept here. We've got like some lights over here. Do you think I should have some natural light on these buildings, or are they fine without? No, I think they're fine without, because the way that I always look at images, right? Whether it's concept art or if it's your own image or your own personal work, is look at the purpose that light has within the scene. So the reason why this is all dark, right? So like all this stuff kind of hidden, is just because we want to drive all the focus here, right? Like the focus should be on this area. If we then start adding like lights up here, then we're diversifying or like making our scene more diffuse and more difficult to read, right? So at a certain point, you need some sort of contrast in your scene so that we pull certain elements to the forefront and these certain elements in the background. so that there's a clear hierarchy of the scene itself. So having something in the dark is perfectly fine as long as it's not completely black, right? If we're gonna go for like the same sort of values as we see in here, then we should be totally fine. So yeah, you can still use artificial lights, but be very conscious about the contrast you have between your main focal point, like the building in the middle, comparing it to the rest of the building surrounding it. I feel the same that it looks better being dark. Yeah, because um so okay. We're gonna switch it over at a certain point. And we're gonna talk about Vatra's work in a little bit, but it is something that you need to be very, very aware of, like the hierarchy of your scene and like where you want to pull the focus to. Because unfortunately, I mean, we're gonna talk about it in a second, right? But like this is still an example of how chaotic it can get when you don't have proper control over like the contrast and the colors and the focus and the lighting, right? But we will talk about some things that we can do there with Vatra in a bit. Cool. But yeah, let's see. So yeah, I don't think you need like any natural light. They're completely fine without it. What is gonna happen though is that once you're gonna put like all the entire scene in textures, you might have to rebalance the lights because you can have some lights there. It's just you want to make sure that it's not um as important in terms of the hierarchy of your scene. So that is always a thing that I go back to. And a way to test that is literally just taking this thing. Drink. Black and white. Cool. That's it. And that's a simple way of testing if your scene still has like a good hierarchy. Because you can already tell that like the lightest values are in the middle, right? So that's where we're going to um that's where we're going to be looking at the most. And if we then even do like an additional thing, say we slap like a color on it. 100 pixels is way too much. This is the same thing as like squinting your eyes, right? That's like a really quick test again to just be like, hey, let me squint my eyes, let me see the values, right? And then you can already clearly see that even by blurring it, you can kind of see that there's like a clear difference between the stuff on the side and then the pillar in the middle. And then obviously, it's not only about like the values and how they are separate from each other, but it's also how they contrast between each other, right? Because if you surround something that is light by something that is dark, or vice versa, by the way, you're gonna pull extra attention to it just because of the contrast. Right? So that is something to be aware of. Like art fundamentals, very important. And that helps you create like a good scene hierarchy. Okay. But you got a good concept. And that is gonna help a lot. It's gonna make it like 1,000 times easier, honestly, because all this thinking that I'm laying out on the table right now has already been done by the concept art. That's why concept art is so beautiful, because they did like a lot of the heavy lifting. Those some fine tips. No worries. Yeah. But yeah, awesome work, Sergio. Great stuff. I love seeing the block out. It's coming together like really nicely already. Yeah. Curious to see some textures on this bad boy. It's gonna look sick. No worries. Then we got Sheila. Welcome, Sheila. Wait. I definitely added you. Did I not? Yeah. Oh my god, I didn't even set the file up yet. Ignore all this. This is behind the curtain stuff that you're seeing now, so very, very NDA. Cool, we're done. Let's have a look. How can we help you? Oh, sorry. There were some questions in the chat as well, so feel free. Oh my god, fuck. Connor behind extent. Oh my god. Ah. So there was a question in the chat as well. From Zayad. What do you think about volunteer roles? Honestly, the only reason why they exist is because they know that they can now get away with it because there's so many people in the job market, and I think they fucking suck. You should be paying people. You should be paying your labor. Like I don't know why this is such like a weird thing. Like it is in my opinion, like it's a little bit different where, for example, you do like an unpaid internship because then it's like the government is still involved and is in most cases still subsidizing your labor and all that kind of stuff, right? But let's say you have none of that, and then the first actual job that you get is a volunteer role. That just fucking sucks from the. And the only way that they can do that is just because there's so many people on the market, right? So then people are like, well, I'm not really getting any good jobs that are paid, so I might as well get a volunteer job, right? I think that is the only reason why they're around. Yeah, like Omar says, it's just taking advantage of you being desperate, and volunteer experience on your CV doesn't really look great to me, frankly. Just my 2 cents. I 100% agree. Better off making cool personal projects. I 100% agree. Because I feel that honestly, the benefit that you get from like, oh, but then I can show experience of working in a team, right? Okay, that's cool, but just do a game jam or something, right? Like there's so many opportunities to do game jams. We organize our own team challenges, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like that is, at least everyone is on board with the idea that like, hey, we're gonna do this together, and there's no imbalance between just like, hey, look, if this works out, then I'm gonna get fucked, and the guy making it is gonna run away with all the money, right? Usually that's the case. There are also other setups that can work, but they are risky. So for example, a revenue share scheme, or I don't know, a share scheme or something like that, right? Where you attach, don't get paid, but if the game does well, you are entitled to a percentage of the total income. I wouldn't classify that as like a volunteer thing, but those are like highly risky contracts to go in, but they also have the potential to be highly lucrative as well. It's just high risk, high reward, and I feel like those things are that, but cranked up to the max. Personally, I don't really like. I've never done them myself. First of all, I don't really like the idea of them necessarily, because it kind of comes down to the same thing that Omar was saying, to a certain degree, where it's like, look, if you're taking all the risk, you might as well do it on something that is you, right? Like 100% you. Oh, Joshua, sorry, I just saw your message there. It is indeed a paid community, because we do offer a lot of goodies in return as well. So we make it worth your while. But thank you for asking the question. Probably only time for volunteer would be if you're making a game with your friends. But yeah, that's not even volunteering, right? That is literally just like you and your friends getting together to make a game. Like, because the difference there is that everyone is on the same line. Everyone is volunteering, right? But it's, yeah. And then there's still some things that you like. If you become serious, then you still need to talk about all the business elements and all that kind of stuff behind it. But if you're doing it with really good friends, that is going to be like really easy, right? Because hopefully after that development, you're all aligned and you know that everyone's kind of pulling their weight. And yeah. Ideally, that would make it easier. However, yeah, making a game with your friends, um, the reason why I talk so much about alignment is because you're gonna get to know your friends in a new way. And especially in the beginning, if there's an imbalance in the amount of time that someone can put in, that can be really frustrating for a bunch of people. So keep that in mind if you're making anything your friends read. The way that I would do it is try to do something small first to really get to know who they are professionally, right? Because you might be the best friends in the world, but they might just have like a completely different work ethic compared to you. And that is going to be super frustrating if you're then locked into a game for like a couple of years, let's say. So yeah, saying about Sheila's work on the screen, like, oh my god, even Sheila's realistic art is cracked. What can't she do? Yeah, this is cool. It's cool to see people like extend their horizon. Things get really complex when you start taking a game jam to release. Usually ends up cutting out people. Well, yeah, because like the whole intent behind the game jam is like, hey, we do like this really cool prototype for like a couple of days, and then that's it, right? And then I go back to my regular life. But if there's something there, again, it can be like really lucrative, right? But everyone needed to be in with like the same sort of mentality and the same sort of expectations, right? Like those two things, if they're aligned, then that's going to be really helpful. Are you a big fan of hard surface art or no? Not really. Not in the traditional way. Like hard surface, like gun sci-fi kind of stuff. Not really. Not necessarily. Hey, Cordiac. Good to see you. All right, let's get into some more feedback. So, Sheila, what can we help you with? Mainly looking for feedback. The texturing. Here we go. My Achilles heel. Where is my pen? Right. Okay, let's have a look at some things first here. The labels, right? Let's start with those. Oh. Oh, am I just gone? Oh. Oops. So the label mask looks a little bit too stylized. I mean, honestly, this looks like fucking stylized as well, so... God, that looks so weird. I guess it's because from all the moisture is kind of shrinking and pulling the paper. That's why it's like tearing at the seams like that. That looks so weird though. And also especially because they kind of rip in like different way too. This might be one of those cases where it's like yeah, exactly. It's like you're kind of running ahead here. It's you have to kind of, even though you have a really good reference, you kind of have to take it to like what would be more logical than real life, you know? Where you kind of take this label and then you're like, okay, this might just look weird because my gut instinct says that it looks weird. So what does get like 10 different references together of what like these like old labels on like barrels look like, and then see what the average is like. Because if it is not the average, then you should go with the average instead. If it is the average, then it's just gonna look like this. That doesn't mean that we can't still make some changes though. Because what I do really like is that it kind of follows the curve of the battle, right? So wherever it goes into like a little divot, it seems like that has a different effect on the paper, right? Or like the label itself, where it kind of takes that out of it. That could be like really nice to integrate as well. So that we're just like cutting like little sections out. And that can help with the read of it. Maybe playing around with the intensity of the maybe the edge mask, right? So where you have like the tiny little fragments. Maybe because you got big shapes going on, they're good, but I feel like we're missing like the medium shapes where we have like a little bit more breakup. Because we have the bigger shapes, but we don't have the medium shapes that kind of help the mask with its readability. Because from a distance, everything just kind of looks like it is just like very smooth, right? So the mask is basically missing. Mask is missing medium shapes. That's going to help as well. Hello, Hadzino! Having released a game with friends, it's difficult to manage everyone's vision and time invested to not create resentment. Yeah, that's it, right? Like, and especially doing that over the long haul, where that's where it gets into like the boring business stuff, right? Where you say like, hey, look, it's 4 of us. We're gonna do a 25% equal split. Let's say that happens, right? Even at that level, let's say another person has other things to do or has other commitments in life, right? Where he can't put in as much time as the other people are doing when they need him to, then that is already a thing where it's like, okay, for people in that team, it might create resentment, right? And that's where it goes. Yeah, the honeymoon phase is over and business tasks come up. Yeah, because there's so much more than just like making cool stuff. But yeah, you kind of have to do that. And in the beginning, it's all fun and games when you literally want to make a game, right? But at a certain point, you kind of have to be serious about it and say like, hey, look, this is turning into a bigger thing that we anticipated it to. So we need to start taking it seriously. Start setting some. But even just the thought of that is going to have people be like, oh my God, I was just having so much fun. And now we have to think about like all these bullshit that comes up, like setting up a business and doing like a revenue split or becoming a director of a company now and like having those, you know, it can be very daunting for people. Yeah, overall, really good job done though with the texturing on this. I know we're kind of jumping between chat and this. So this looks weird where the paint is on top of the right? Does that logically make sense? Because I feel like the thickness of the rust, right, is going to be way thicker than the paint layer. So you kind of would expect like even because you're right in the logic, right? The logic says that the paint layer gets stripped away, then water can reach like the bare metal underneath, which is going to cause the whole thing to rust, right? But I think just the layering of the rust is going to be thicker than the paint, if that makes sense. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily expect to see the paint on top of the rust, because the rust is going to be coming out of that layer. So that might be something to change up. Or it shouldn't be on top of the paint, but it feels like the thickness of rust is gonna be higher, right? Layer. And then maybe the last thing that I'll add is I do like this edge that you have going on, where you can kind of see that the rust is kind of infecting the paint, right? I do like that. The issue that I have with it is that it feels a little bit too soft. So maybe breaking up the edge of the rust can be helpful here as well. Because if you read it from a distance, it kind of makes it so that the two layers kind of blend together, right? Like especially here, you kind of create this like, it's almost like a halo effect of like rust. Where it's probably still, it's a little bit better defined. Or it kind of even has like a darker color that it kind of blends from, right? Where it goes from like blue to darker color in it. I know we're being very nitpicky here, but that is also because like I feel like you've done such a good job on it already, right? So I kind of have to be nitpicky. So I don't know how to explain it, but like the rust, I'll call it a halo. And then last thing that I just noticed. Reducing the height of the paper because it kind of has like a strong thickness to it. Where that's probably not going to be that. Gotta have something to critique. Not gonna lie, sometimes it gets really difficult to critique something because, yeah, for some of this, like even with texturing, right? Like I'm sometimes like really out of my depth, so I that's why you see me leaning into like art fundamentals so often, or thinking about the logic of things, right? Because the logic is kind of like underlying thing that supports it. But yeah, great stuff though, Sheila. This is looking great, especially because this is your first foray really going into realism, right? So, freaking awesome job. I'm gonna be really curious to see where this is gonna go. Yeah, awesome stuff, Sheila. Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing it as well. Cool. Who was next? We got Lily next. We've got a nice bunch of people here today. We got almost 40 viewers. For people that are new to the stream, feel free to ask me any questions about game development, environment art, or just any career advice. If you have anything, have a chat about. I'm all ears, and then we can kind of weave that into format. The big thing I like about your approach is relying on art fundamentals and having a big emphasis on storytelling. Yeah. Yeah, I think I think that's where my I don't even want to say traditional training comes in, but it's just I've wanted to become like a concept artist in the beginning, right? So like a lot that I learned is from like looking at concept art and like breaking it down. But yeah, that's probably where it comes from. Hey McVal. Oh, nice to see you here, Zoe. I'm sorry that we didn't get to you like quick enough. But always rewatch the recording, and I appreciate you being here. Yeah, no point having a pretty picture if it doesn't tell a story. Exactly. I really wanted to ask which Shoop. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at Lily's work. Go to the thread, highlight. So, First question, should I keep adjusting the colors in the textures or try to tweak things in post? Um, oh, wait, before we go into that, I wanted to bring up another thing because you mentioned that it still feels off compared to the concept, right? Honestly, at this stage, it is totally fine to feel that way. There, I call it like the value suck, or I don't know, like there is a moment that every project goes to where it's like, oh my god, it doesn't look right. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this just sucks. Blah blah blah. It still doesn't feel like the concept, right? But it's you kind of have to take a step back and look at what the biggest thing is that you can do that day, and just keep chipping away. Because art is all about iteration, right? So that's why I wrote this thing down here. Is like if it still feels off, that's totally normal. It's nothing to feel bad about, and it's also not an indication of your skill set, right? It's just that is a part of the creative process where you have to see like, okay, I don't like it. What do I don't like about it? Figure out the biggest issues, and then whittle them down, right? So like work on them until there's less issues than there were before. That is basically like a very high level approach onto how to on how to get closer to the concept in this, right? Because yeah, I noted it here, like the value suck is real. Just every project goes to that value suck where it's just like, oh god, what the hell am I doing? So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Because you are making progress. It's getting closer and closer. But yeah, I would focus on the biggest issues, and maybe I can explain what I think are the biggest issues right now. But let's go to your questions first. Right. So your first question was, should I keep adjusting the colors and the textures, or try to tweak things with post processing? So it is way too early now to do post processing. Post processing is literally what you do in post, right? Like after the project is done. So that means that once you have like all the textures in, you've done your lighting, all that kind of stuff, that's when we jump over to post and do some like color correction. We'll add some vignettes and all that kind of stuff. Because if we do post processing now, what is going to happen is that it's going to change the interpretation of the colors on the screen. And then what we will do in our textures is we'll try to counterbalance them without knowing after a while, right? Because let's give a simple example, right? Let's say that you increase the saturation of the entire piece by like, I don't know, let's say 50% to make it really clear. That means that now your textures are like too saturated. You're gonna be like, okay, now I have to go back to substance and desaturate them all. But that's gonna cause issues if you then have to, after a certain point, go back to your post processing and then want to tweak the saturation or notice that you had your saturation wrong all this time. So we want to stay away from post processing for the longest time because it's gonna fuck up the baseline. So yeah. So we need to create a solid base first, get all the textures in, make sure that they have like a good color range to look at, like a nice saturation, and that they're sort of consistent across the board. And then once we got that done, then if we put the lighting in and all that kind of stuff, then we can start thinking about post processing. Post processing too early so that you have to backtrack and rework some textures. Yeah, exactly. Like ideally, post processing is something that you only do on top and doesn't cause any rework, right? Good to have a parameter for it in the SBS material. Yeah, but see, that's where you go into the trap of, okay, but now I need to do that for everything, right? And then you're just tweaking your textures over and over, and now you're tweaking your textures on one side and then counter tweaking with post processing, and it's like, what the hell am I doing? You should keep it to one source for the longest time. Yeah. So right now we're not making it any more complicated than it. We're just sticking with the textures. We're just gonna tweak it. Well, textures and lighting, right? And then after a while we'll do processing. Yeah, I mean, it's in the name, right? Like, that's literally why it's called post-processing. We do it at the end. We do it in post. Even though I walk through the valley of suck, I shall texture the detail, the density right, the PBR checked, in Unreal as it is in Substance. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some stuff that you can do there, you know, but most of the time, it's just like you get to this stage where everything is in a state of being done, but it's nowhere near finished. That's where it's like, oh god, there's still so much. Um, but it's normal. Get through. So, the last thing that I wanted to bring up, because you were asking for any other feedback, I just wanted to point out to think about like what was discussed last week, right? And I think you are stripping away like some of the color from your trim sheets, which is good. Um, but yeah, really make it simple for yourself and just have like a single color per texture, or maybe have like one um base material, and then you could probably have like a tinted material as well, like we discussed last. Yeah, I would say keep on grinding, keep on doing the things that you're doing. I think honestly, the majority of the stuff right now comes down to lighting. Really have a look at the light sources that we're seeing here, and maybe just making them a little bit softer, right? Because your lighting in comparison is like pretty harsh. So that could be a way to like already dial it back a little bit, make the lighting more softer. Um, yeah, and just trying to get it more towards you can see. So that would be the first thing that I would do. So like do a quick rebalancing of the lighting. So let's make a little to-do list. Or well, I'm not going to call it rebalance. That sounds too big. Soften your light. Right? For example, I'm looking at this corner in specific, and I'm like, oh, there's barely any light coming in here. Even though in your area, it seems like there's a lot of light happening here. And it's very, very orange, right? Or like very yellow in comparison. So soften the lights. Get some volumetrics in there. Because there's barely any volumetrics in your scene, where in this scene, you can really clearly see that like it's almost like this thing stands out and then the rest of it is just surrounded by like a blue haze. Right? And you can just do that with like an exponential hide fog. Like tweak it so that we're kind of getting that effect as well. This will be cool. Yeah. Some volumetrics. Your exponential hide fog. And those are honestly going to be like a massive differentiator. Well, so that's where I would start, because that's going to have an effect on the entire scene. And then honestly, the rest of it is just keep doing what you're doing. Keep iterating on the textures, keep improving on the detail in the scene itself. Because yeah, you're laying the groundwork, right? There's a lot of cool stuff already happening. It's gonna be just iteration and more detail in the geometry and mapping, right? Lots of trim sheet stuff. So yeah. But you're on the right track, Lily. So trust yourself. You got this. And yeah, keep on the good work. Pretty much, Tim. We'll tackle the to-do list. Yeah. Sometimes, so what I try to do with the to-do list, and I try to do that for most people that like do it in with Wednesday, right? It's like I always have a list of like, well, not always. I have a list of all the stuff that needs to be done in my head. But that is not conducive to like an enjoyable like artistic experience, right? So what I tend to do is the same that I would do for myself, right? Is I think about the list that I have in my head. Okay, what are the top 3 things that I can do, and just forget about the rest. Just ignore it because they're not important. If they are important, then next time, like next week, that I'll get back to working on my project, they're gonna come up anyway. So I'm not gonna forget about them. But it's also it's a way to like simplify the process and make it more enjoyable rather than be like, oh my god, I have like 1,000 posts in front of me. There's so much more stuff to do. And it's like, oh, I got this whole checklist in Notion or whatever you want to do. Like I personally always find them like really overwhelming and not really that creative. So that's like a way to like eat the creative pressure on yourself. Yeah. Cool stuff, Lily. Thank you for joining and sharing your work. Next we have Omar, who is on the screen already. Awesome. Let's dive into some questions first. So Veer is asking 2 trim sheet questions. How do you make trim sheets that match textile density? Also, why is it important for trim sheets to match textile density? Well, so the second question first, right? Like, so for anything in your scene, the reason why textile density is a thing, so that it just means that we have consistent resolution across all of your assets, right? So you just it's just a way to get consistency between all the assets in your scene. And then sometimes in games we go above or we go under textile density because there's a shift in the importance of those assets in the scene, right? So that's why cinematic assets, because they're going to be close to the camera, they have a higher textile density usually than other objects. So when it comes to textile density, like textile density for trim sheets, it is still the same rule set. It is still just to create consistency between all the assets. How do you make your trim sheets match textile density? That is, it comes down to you're not gonna have a perfect match. You're just not gonna have it. The way that you avoid any big stretching is just by sort of working around your trim sheet. So for example, if you have a trim sheet that only has big pillars, like big wooden pillars, right? Like thick chunks of wood, you're not going to be able to map like the side of a plank on it. That's just not going to happen because then we're breaking the textile density by so much that we have to scale the UVs by so much that it's going to look off. So that means that we have 2 choices. Either we don't make that plank, right? Or if we really, really need that plank, we need a new trim sheet, or we need to adjust the trim, right? So it's a push and pull between the two. So yeah, but like the actual workflow is still just, you know, your textile density from your scene. You just type it in, and you just click a button. It just scales the UVs to where you want it to be, and then you might have to scale it up, down. I mean, yeah, or maybe sculpt that plank as a unique asset. Depending on the use case, yeah. Yeah, like all the doors are open. Like if the trim sheet is not an option, then you just have to look for the next option. Or if it's too big, use an RGB mask. No, not in all the cases. Because you still want your base texture to be close to textile density. So you can't stretch your base texture and have it really blurry and then try to cover it up with an RGB mask. That doesn't really work. The only way that we kind of do that, or like the only asset that we really do that on, is on rock surfaces. And it kind of depends on which studio you look at. But I do know that a lot of studios use this as like, hey, look, we're gonna do a unique bake so that we have nice normal information for the edges, and then we're gonna layer an additional detail normal map on top of it to get some crisp detail back into the thing. But we cannot add additional detail through an RGB mask, because usually those RGB masks, they are also like lower resolution, and the base surface is still going to be under texel density. It might be a good way to kind of hack your way through things, which is sometimes what we have to do in games, for sure. So it's not out of the question. It's never that you can't do it. But if you're following things by the book, then yeah, shouldn't be doing it. Nate Stevens is big on textile density, so forget I'd asked. Or to try to get some new perspectives on it. Yeah, I mean, textile density is a thing that is really important to any production environment. That's why so many people talk about it. But I feel like there's also we overemphasize textile density, where most of the time it is literally just clicking a button and maybe scaling your UV down or up by a little bit. That's it, right? Or for unique acids, you just press the button and see if it works, and then maybe you have to re-UV or like change your texture size, but that's about it. So I know that like the math and the underlying thing is like this big mindfuck in the beginning, because it is, because you're transferring data from like a 2D space to 3D, and that screwed me up in the beginning too. But yeah, in the tool belt of an environment artist, it is good to have, but it's not necessarily the thing that is the most important. Follow it as close as possible, but adjust slightly if needed, depending on. So with anything really, so when we're talking about textile density and scaling, you can, I kind of have like sort of a rule for myself that I can go up by 30% and go down by 30%, and that's it. Because if you scale down by like 50%, then you're gonna see the difference between textile density. And this can count for just like asset scaling, right? Because let's say in Unreal you have a rock that is really big, and then you're like, oh, but I want to have it as a pebble. That's not gonna work, right? Because you're then gonna squish like a 4K texture down to like the size of this, and that's gonna break textile density. So yeah, depending on the situation. Usually, well, not even depending on the situation, like just I try to limit myself to like 25 or like 30% up and down with like any base resolution that I have. And that goes for UV scaling, but also for asset scaling, because they follow the same textile density set. Hello, Charlie. Good to see you. Veer, you were also asking about did I develop that over time, right? Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff that I'm talking about is just like developed over the years and years that I've worked on stuff, right? I think the most important thing to know about the artistic journey is that it is a journey, and you need to experiment with what makes you feel good and what makes you feel bad, right? And I'm keeping it super high level. But for example, I tried all the things that I said, right? Like having my whole project mapped out in Notion or like in Google Sheets, and then okay, I worked on this, cool, I'll take it off, cool. But at a certain point, I noticed that I wasn't using the list, because my mindset had to be more flexible than just a list, because I felt like a machine, and I don't want to be doing that, especially not for like personal projects. So it just comes from experience, yeah. Okay, Omar, let's have a look here. The horse thief, awesome. I love the inspiration, the reference that you have, and you'd like some lighting, position, and cool. So first things first, I do love the color contrast that is happening. You know, you got like the nice blue sky, like with like the fire in the tower and the fire here as well. That is kind of pulling me over there, which is cool. I like that. And then we obviously have like the road coming down with like the horse over here, which works really good. Got like the composition laid out like really nicely. I feel like honestly the thing that I was missing at first was looking at your references, just like the contrast of like the horse compared to the rest of it, right? It was so striking. Um in its difference where I kind of want to maybe you could emphasize that somehow here, maybe with some like or maybe with some like fill lights or something like that so that the horse pops out more compared to the background. Because that would like really sell the whole thing. But yeah, like that was my main takeaway here. Like that was the first one, like the contrast that you have between the horse and its surrounding, right? Because even look at like how desaturated like the skin color is, and like the tones of like all the people around it compared to like the um, bright white of like even some of it is almost like holy. It's such a nice way of like adding this painterly contrast, right? And being freer with what you do. And then also like what's really struck to me was like it's really desaturated for the most part, right? Like even if you look at the night sky, it is very, very grayish blue compared to what you have here. Um, but that is honestly, it's more of like an observation. I'm not telling you that like, oh, it needs to be desaturated, but like that's a striking difference that I see too. Yeah. The horse looks holy in comparison to everyone else. Yeah, it's just because there's some symbolism going on with that too, right? Yeah. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here, Veer, and I wish you a nice evening and see you next week. The horse has something magical. Yeah, it does, right? And it would be kind of nice to kind of play into that because that's also why they have like people chasing after it too. And talking about those people, I would honestly add a bunch more people. Well, not a bunch, but maybe just like a couple of people like filling out this space more, so that we kind of have we're like emphasizing like the scale and the scope, like the people just coming out of the gate, right? Maybe we can have like some people standing guard or something, like looking at the people there, because they're gonna be tiny anyway. You can kind of have like more freedom here, just a bunch of people looking. But yeah, so like more emphasis on the horse, like maybe with the color contrast. That would be cool. Color is saying the left foliage with the bright flowers are pulling a bit, maybe darken that bit a little bit. Yeah, I do agree. Like this is like very saturated compared to like anything else, right? Hello, 3D Ben. Welcome. How are you doing? So yeah, this section is too saturated by a little bit. Yeah, a little bit of tweaking. Because especially if you look at this section, it's grayish, right? Yeah. I wonder. Okay. Let me see. I'm curious to play around with some of this. What if saturation? Might honestly just leave that up to you. Because like I feel like we have to go like pretty specific. Because then yeah, I kind of want to. Oh my god, that's so much. Oh. Okay, maybe not that much. What is this on? Highlights. Okay. But it's almost like you do want the horse to like jump out from like the scene. Obviously, this looks horrendous, but yeah, we want to emphasize the horse a little bit. So yeah. Oh yeah, there was also another note where like the weather looks really nice. But then it's also raining. It honestly looks like it's a clear, nice night, and then also rain, which was quite kind of confusing. Like it felt like those two things were like contradicting them. So I don't know. I get what you're trying to do, right? Like with the rain to kind of emphasize like the mood, right? Like it always adds like a little bit of mystery, like a little bit of intensity to a scene. You have like some rain coming in. That might be something to think about. I don't know. Maybe you don't feel the same way. But that was something that I just found like, interesting. And then also on the video, so the video looks amazing. But I mean, I'll show it off as well. Let's see, because it is worth. Oh, I cannot open the browser. Okay, very interesting. Oh, I guess I could just do this. What am I doing? I swear, I know how to use a computer. Yeah, it's gonna be cut off a little bit, but this is the thing that I mean. Like the stuff that you did animation-wise, like making all the foliage move, having like all the wind coming in and like the wind swaying the tree, looks fucking awesome, right? The issue that I have is now I want to see an animation on the horses as well, because everything else is moving, right? So I'm like, it creates like this real disconnect between, oh, everything else is moving, but the horse is static. And I know. I'm not saying it's gonna be nice, you know, it's not gonna be a great thing to have to animate horses and all that kind of stuff. But it's just there's a weird disconnect there happening, right? I don't know what to do with that because in fuck, did I close it? Because I mean, it is gonna be a ton of work to get that working, but it could be the thing that could set it apart, right? Yeah, that was a note. Like I said, like I don't want you to necessarily take away like, oh, you need to do an animation. But yeah, that's the thing. Like you did awesome, right? Like I think the weird thing is you shot yourself in the foot by doing such a good job on the animation, because now you set the bar so high because everything in the scene moves, but the horse, right? Like the thing that is the main focal point in the. So that's why I'm saying like that's where disconnect comes from, right? Because the rest of it looks so good. So a little bit disconnect. But yeah, I'll leave that to you. Feel free to do with that what you want. Because I know the work that that's gonna take. But it could be an interesting thing to explore. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your work, Omar. Maddie is saying probably a weird idea, but you could have the horse laying on its side, but it might be cutting a corner. Well, yeah, that would kind of defeat the purpose of like the horse thief, right? That would be, yeah. Maybe the moving shot just has the horse and the people left out. I mean, that it could be an option, but that also feels like a compromise, right? I think if we were to compare like the options, then I would still have it the way that it is right now, and then just be like, okay, I'm not gonna animate horses. I'm not an animator, right? And I'll take the hit on that. Compared to essentially leaving it all out, because then you sacrifice the story, right? Because so much of it is like baked into the chase and the horse thief and that kind of stuff. So it would be a shame to have it without them. So this is a real case where like maybe everyone individually is gonna end up with a different choice that they would make, right? But that would be at least my thinking around it, where it's gonna be a compromise nonetheless. So maybe having the horse not animate. Least bad option. Yeah. Thanks for pitching in though, Maddie and Connor. Like it is one of those creative decisions where you just have to be like, okay, like what do I do? Right? Like what are the options? Like evaluate like all the options that you have and then see what works the best for your intent. Hmm. Lovely. But again, thanks for sharing your work, Omar. Yeah. I don't think I've said it already, but like this looks awesome. So great stuff. It has something sculptural that doesn't bother me, but I totally get it that it looks odd to most people. See, yeah, I was thinking about that angle too, and I can get it, you know, I can get it. So that's the thing. If it doesn't bother you, honestly, that's all you needed, right? Because in like, if we look at it from a high level, right, the execution of the art and like all the other animation, all that kind of all the stuff that you've done, like animating the horse as an environment artist is so low on like the totem pole, right? Or like the hierarchy list or the priorities list that it's just like, yeah, okay. It's fine. Cool. Who was left in the list? So round one would be next and then Zoe. Well, let's see. We've gotta make a little bit more haste because we still have half the people left. Jesus. Cool. So, round one. Library of Alexandria. So, number one, the question is, do you think the color of the column works in the scene? Does it come across out of place? Only a little bit, but I don't think it's like too big of an issue, honestly. Um, the thing, the thing that I try to do with this kind of stuff is I always have a tint, like a tint parameter that I can just tweak on the fly. For these smaller tweaks, I can then just in the engine just be like, just a little bit and just match it in the scene itself. That's usually my preferred way of working because you get as close as possible in Painter and then you can kind of give it that last nudge without having to go back and forth time, to like match it perfectly. Um, so yeah, it is a little bit like I would make it like a slight bit darker to kind of match it with like like this guy in the back, right? The wall here or something. But it would be like ever so slightly. Kind of compared to like these. So that's totally fine. I don't think that's a big deal at all. Like a small tweak. And then the second question was, what are your current thoughts on the assets so far? Did it look good or did it down the line? I'm not sure if you're talking about like these assets. I don't think so. Right? But currently the assets that are in like a good stage, they look really good. Especially some of this stuff on the left, like getting all the scrolls to poke out. That's looking really nice. But yeah, honestly, the way to do this is again like thinking iteration, right? At a certain point, you're gonna have to tweak the assets because you're gonna do another iteration and you're gonna make like all the tables and all the chairs and then maybe you want to like change a little bit. So it's all about iteration. Nothing is really final until the whole scene is finalized, right? So I literally said like, okay, the assets look great so far. Maybe more details would be needed further down the line, but that's okay. We can get to that as we get to polish. Because just to give you a broad overview how this works in the industry is that go from your pre-production, right, which is mostly like you don't have the full team working on it yet. Then you go into full-on production, and at the end of production, you go to like shutdown or closing phase or polish or whatever the studio calls it. So you basically do like a bunch of iterations, and then you try to get it as close to the benchmark as possible. But there's always going to be that final phase where you're going to have to polish things up, because you're now in a phase where we're thinking about like, okay, what is the highest priority for the project? And then we're going to focus our attention here, and then oh, that's actually a good shout, Raj. So this is for Omar's work. The easier solution would kind of make it like super slow-mo, and you only have to animate the horse in translation by like 2 or 3 inches. I think that's a good shout, yeah. That's a good shout. I like that. And then you could still have like your animated scene with like all the wind effects and all that kind of stuff, just as like a separate thing. Let's see. So Route 1 is saying, okay, because I'm using a titleable material with an RGB mask. That's totally fine. Is the detail with the red and green okay? Or should it be the same color as the same column? Oh, that's this stuff, right? So with this stuff, I was kind of confused, because if we are going to see color on the pillars, then I'm expecting to see more of it. Because right now it feels weird that like most of the pillars, or like, well, most of the scene is just brown, and then we get like this little, it's almost like it looks out of place. That's a real issue that I have, right? Because the rest of the scene kind of just looks like beige and sand color, where then you have like a couple of these on top of the pillars. So maybe think about that if you want to add color, try to do it in more places and see what is historically semi-accurate. Yeah, you do have like some alphas at the bottom, but they're not colorful enough. Or, well, you also have like the blue on top here, but I feel like it is not enough to convince me that it's not just like an outlier on the pillar. That makes sense. Like, I was expecting to see more patterns potentially, or more vibrant patterns even. Right? Because you do have a pattern here, you have a pattern here, here, but it feels like they're few and far between. So maybe thinking about like pattern here or something like that. Right, and then you have like a trim over here. And then, yeah, do that on the entire wall. But then you just have to be really careful with like the colors that you use, so that it doesn't become like really overwhelming, right? It's all about like how you balance the whole thing. But yeah, great stuff, Route 1. Looking good. Nice progress as well. Maybe change the middle part of the column and just have patterns like in Assassin's Creed Origin. I don't really know what they look like. But I mean, honestly, that's up to you. I think with this kind of stuff, you kind of just have to play around until you find like a good balance. I just try like a couple of iterations, try to find like a really quick way of doing them, and seeing what works, and then committing yourself. Because yeah, it's hard to see what you have, right, without having like a specific ref that we're looking. Yeah, no worries. Happy to help. Yeah, and good luck, man. Good luck. have fun with this. Come along nicely. Cool, and then we go to Zoe. Zoe's working on Astral Clock. Widely supporting BE whilst working in VFX. That is awesome, Zoe. I appreciate that a lot. I think we even had like a couple of people join. I'm open to any feedback on how I could enhance it in. Okay. Not a fan of that necessarily, because you're just saying like, oh, give me thing. Can do. We'll see what we can do. Because the reason why I'm not necessarily a fan, to just give some context there, is I don't know what your plan necessarily is. I don't know what are like known issues, like yeah. But let's have a look, see what we can do. Okay. Let's have a look. It's a minor issue, but there's an alpha that is dragged over like multiple materials. So for example, we can see that the stone is damaged by this crack, but then the metal is also damaged by the same crack as well. So we would probably expect the metal to be bent or something like that if the crack tends to continue. It's a small thing, but just thinking about like how something would react like that is always good to keep in mind. Some of these bevels are like pretty sharp. So what we tend to do on assets is that we overemphasize like how thick the bevel is going to be, just because we then have longer readability on the asset. Because let's say if we're at this distance, then we can't really see the normal map anymore, and it just reads like it's like a low poly at that point. So potentially widening some of the barrel. Gonna be very helpful there. Another tip that I can give is, and this is probably going to be like a bigger tip, but it is really thinking about how this prop got affected by its environment, right? Let me explain that. So what I mean by that is, right now we kind of have some like generic kind of dust kind of just gathering around the space, but it doesn't feel like anything, right? So what I tend to do, and you've probably heard me say this a couple of times in this session alone, is that I think about like, okay, if this is going to be Astral Clock from whatever time period, right? Think about like where it would be stored, who would be keeping it. Because if this is like a collector, right, that's taking really good care of it, then it's going to look completely different compared to a person who just had it in their laboratory for whatever reason, right? And then we can think about, okay, what were the effects of the environment of, let's say, that laboratory on the prop, right? So we then have to think about water, sun, dust, dirt, all that kind of stuff. And that is all going to have an effect on the weathering of the prop itself. For example, water is going to lead to rust, oxidization, all those kind of things. But it's also going to counteract like dust a little bit, right? Because let's say if you have moisture in there, and you have like water dripping from it, that's going to get rid of dust, right? Because it's going to carry it with it. And you can get some like really nice interplay between some of these, where right now it just looks like, okay, there's going to be dust all over this place, but it feels very generic. Feels like there's not really that much attention that's been placed on it. Where you're right in the sense that like you're going to have a lot of dust here, but you're probably going to have like way more dust here than you have here. And so this is going to be very subtle. And then the buildup here is going to increase again. Right? And then the same here. So you'll probably have like more buildup in the middle than you have on the sides. And then also breaking that up again, where it's not going to be consistent, right? You're going to have, this side is going to look different compared to this side. And we get some like asymmetry. We get some like little bits of breakup in there as well, where it's not consistent. So yeah, thinking about the impact of its environment, how it gets affected, and thinking about like the layering that we talk about, right? Like all those layers, they're going to be very subtle, and like all of them in conjunction with each other make it really looking. But yeah, we kind of have to put in the effort and really think about like where things are going to be gathering. Let's see. Oh yeah. Second thing is any generic masking. We need to break that up always. Like it is fine to start with like a generator, right? Like if you work with like a generator inside a Substance Painter, totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But then we need to put in extra work to make sure that it doesn't look like a generator. So really putting in the time to like go out and paint some of those areas and like add some of those areas back in, and then have like another layer with a different kind of dirt pattern that kind of breaks up the first one. It's layering, layering, layering to make it look, compared to just being like, okay, I'm gonna use a generator, maybe I'll mask it with like another mask, and then that's it. To make something look really, really nicely detailed, we have to put in that extra effort and really think about, yeah, the impact of its environment, right? Like people are going to be handling it. We're going to have like smudges and like handprints and all that kind of stuff on it as well. So yeah, the way that I would do this is it's fine to start with a generator, right? Generator first, then break it up with a couple of noises, and then have like a paint mask. But this stuff, like the noises in the paint, needs to be contextual. Contextual. What I mean by that is, if you have a generator that's just like, oh, it's just gonna spread dirt across the whole thing, with your noises on top of it, like you can create them in a way where they are contextual to the object and the way that it's like handled, right? So let's say if it's been in storage, we're gonna see like a lot more dirt at the bottom because the base is flaying out and there's gonna be lots more collection spots, right? So we can then add like a gradient that helps us with. And the same with the paint. We want to go in and add more damage or wear or whatever we need to in the spaces that are going to be exposed. I know that I'm keeping it like pretty high level, but I feel like that can be applied to any material or any surface, really. That's going to be really helpful. And also last thing, think about your presentation. Like take it into Marmoset, see what that looks like. or Unreal, wherever you want to present it, and see where you're going to be presenting it, because you are going to have to do tweaks in relation to where you're going to be presenting it. So keep that in. Maybe more shininess on the blue marble. Oh yeah, you can definitely do a lot more with this prop. But I think you're 100% right. Really get that like marble shine in there. That could be really cool. But yeah, I'm gonna leave that up to Zoe. So I try to keep it like really high level, so that hopefully we can be more deliberate about where we apply surfacing details and all that kind of stuff, right? And hopefully also bring out more contrast between different surfaces. So more shine on the blue marble that is then contrasting with the dirt that's surrounding it. Really creating that contrast is going to be cool. Next one up, I think, Mikval, let's have a look at your work. Still a list? I don't think so. So yeah, Mikval, let's have a look. Oh, there we go. So, 2 questions for this week. For the texture, I would like to get some feedback on how it reads now compared to last week. Was also wondering if there's too much edge wear on the bricks currently. Compared to last week, I feel like we lost a lot of variation. It kind of looks more like a generic brick texture that is found in like modern environments, if that makes sense, compared to what you would find in the middle of the hillside somewhere, right? So I feel like we kind of lost something there, because this, I mean, you could still recognize the rows and all that kind of stuff, but just the breakup of the pattern where you had like slimmer sections and thicker sections, like that sort of pattern overall. Maybe it has me misexplaining it last time, but that feels like more natural compared to something that is now, even though like the edge wear and all that kind of stuff really improved, so the readability is way better. They're all really similar to each other, right? So there's no interesting natural pattern stuff that's happening anymore. But the treatment of the brick itself is great though. So it really improved on that front, I think. Like the readability, like the noisiness, like they start to read way better than they did before. Like we kind of lost some of that softness that you see with like a lot of substance, which is really good. I would also like some thoughts on how the corner meshes work, breaking up the corners and where it needs improvement. So it does work. I did want to note here that it is really limited compared to actual separated bricks. In the way where if you have like separate bricks, so let's say like 4 or 5 bricks, now you have so much more flexibility, because you can have like a damaged wall with like a couple of bricks on the floor. You can have like brick piles. You can have, you can have, I don't know, you have way more flexibility. Not to say that this doesn't work, right? I think it does work, especially if we look at the shot here. It does work. We need to, however, find a way to like better blend like the normals together, right? So you would almost, instead of cutting it off at the brick, you would almost want to extend it to where the grout is and then blend it with the grout or something. So that instead of, I draw it. We're looking at it from the top, right? This is your corner, and then you have like your brick coming out of it. That's what it's currently doing. We need to find a way to soften this corner up specifically. And that might be a little bit of mesh trickery. That might also be like a little bit of like normal trickery as well. Yeah, doing that will definitely help. But you know, from like a distance, if we look at it from a distance, this works really well. Right, so great job. I think also another thing that we can do here is just pick like the occasional brick and make it geo. What I did here, it's fine. Right, and then this is gonna help mask up this effect. Nice, that was my focus. I want to make the pattern more complex later. That's good. That's awesome. Maybe I can have a ground texture and paint it under the separate bricks. I mean, you could try. I don't think that's the issue, but I'm not gonna say no to that. I would say give it a try, right? Like give it a try, see what that looks like, and then compare it with the one that we have now. See if it's an, because that's honestly what it comes down to most of the time, right? It's just having to play around with it and then seeing if it works better or not comparatively. Because my gut feeling says that like, yeah, there might be some issues with like blending them still. We're just moving the issue from outside to more of the inside. Because then it might look weird around these areas, you know? Because then, yeah, we're basically moving the cutoff from one side to... But give it a try. I'm curious to see how it looks. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Do you have POM on your main titleable? I think it's disabled for now. Yeah, try that as well, because yeah, I think you should. But the reason why I'm asking is that might also help create like additional shadow depth that then might also obfuscate the shadow difference between those two sections. So yeah, give that a try as well. Just to see if that helps with that effect. Yeah. Cool stuff, McFell. Cool stuff, making some cool shit. Always love to see what you're doing in Houdini. Yeah. Good stuff, man. Forward to seeing more of that work next week. Right. It's free for all right now, I think. Right, thanks. No worries. Let's talk about Evelyn's work. So Evelyn's working on this really cool tattoo box. Saying that it's been a long time. Yeah. I just like to have some feedback on whether there are any touches that I should add or still be significantly. I don't think there's anything to be significantly improved. You did spend a considerable amount of time on the glass. How does it look now? I did have a note for the glass, so let's jump on over. I think especially in this screenshot, well, first of all, the glass looks great, you know? I think you did a fantastic job with getting the interior of the glass to look like really nice. So I think got this like really nice highlight. It looks so good. Like honestly, it reads so good. The only thing that I have an issue with currently is probably with the index of refraction. The IOR value. So what for people that are not familiar with it, like index of refraction is basically if you look through anything glass, or the simplest example is always like a water surface. So imagine that you're looking at a water surface, it's going to distort the viewing angle. So what that is gonna do is basically, let's say there's a fish underwater. It's not gonna be in a position that you think it's gonna be because of the refraction. So glass is also has that, or any see-through surface basically. But what is weird is that Unreal doesn't use real world refraction values. So what I tend to do with this stuff is just set it to like a really low value to have it look good before it looks realistic. Because what we have here is we have a distortion that's happening because the refraction is basically making it look like the interior is like just really small compared to what it would actually take up, right? So that's something we have to fix, but that's like a small thing. Just setting that to like a value that looks visually all right. Pixel, welcome to the chat. Are you currently working on some AAA projects? Yes, I am a senior environment artist at Playground Games for Fable. So that's what I am working on in my full-time job. Cool. So we talked about the refraction. Let me talk about some other small details, right? Wait, let me get this one out of the way. So you talked about like using a square format for like social media postings and all that kind of stuff. That will work well, honestly. I just wanted to say like that could be good. Really zoom in on all those like nice little details. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, talking about small details. There's a couple of things that I noticed. This like towel roll could use with like a little bit more geo because we can kind of see like the separations here, right? So just make that like a little bit smoother. The feather is like pretty thick as well. Honestly, just like get it down. This could look really good. We don't need to do like any resculpting or anything like that. It's fine. And then I had like a couple of small ideas here where we could play around with the idea of like a leftover paint that is just like dripping down. Well, it doesn't have to be animated, right? But you could just have like a couple more spots where you could have like things like leaking down onto the table. I always love when there's some interaction. There's some interaction between multiple objects. Weekly shout out to Physically Based. Glass has an index of refraction of 1.520 in Unreal. But that, like, it's been a while since I used it myself. But that just looks fucking weird though. Right? If you try that value, it doesn't look like it distorts like the surface like way more than you would expect it to be. Do you think stylized or realistic glass is harder? If they're both going to be transparent, they're both equally as hard, I think. I think any translucent or transparent object is usually just like really, really difficult to go around with. Because I can tell you now, so what is happening in most glass surfaces, right? If you want to give it some depth, GPUs really struggle with recognizing which plane needs to be in front of the other plane. So that is like face sorting or something like that. I can't remember what Unreal calls it, but it can't really recognize like which face it needs to like render in front of which face. So you end up, let me see if I can give an example. Our you end up with this weird, just like confused looking mesh that doesn't know which face it needs to render in front of. They are trying to work on that. They have like experimental features that you can take on, and they do a better job to like separate which faces have to go where, but they still really struggle with it. Let me see. Especially if you want to have like a double-sided let's say a plastic bottle or something like that with an interior, that's always gonna look weird. Yeah, okay. So here, this is an example from a project that we did where I was building the shaders for it. You can see this guy over here. That is the bottom of that plastic see-through tub that is rendering in front of the exterior of that plastic tub, which just looks really weird. But that is one of the issues that you have with just like trying to make it read like it's actually plastic. It just can't figure out like how it needs to render the like accurately. Yeah, stylized stuff has more room to fake it, I guess. Just make it more opaque than whatever. Yeah, that is true. Like, they do have more leeway, but honestly, there's a lot of games, even with realistic graphics, that just make, like, glass opaque. Does water have the same issues as glass? No, not for the most part, because it's a single layer, right? So, what I was trying to do here is because this plastic tub is like a see-through plastic tub that has, like, an interior and an exterior. That's where it gets really confused about what it needs to render with. Yeah, Slate, exactly. Like, my brain is not braining when looking at this image. Yeah, 100%. Like, Unreal is not braining when it has to render the image. So that's the sort of stuff that it really struggles with. How many hours did you put into the Operation Malagoa assets? So with any bigger development, it's not one person doing the assets, and I was also not in charge of like any of the assets. We used a lot of outsourcing. We had like internal artists that did a lot of the asset work for us. My responsibilities on most of that stuff was high level art direction, making sure that the terrain was nice, making sure that everything was laid out correctly, doing a lot of environment artwork, but on, for example, for that map, like Operation Malagua, I had to design like multiple POIs, like points of interest, and come up with an idea for them, and then lay out the whole area that also worked within gameplay restrictions too. Done an excellent job, congrats. Yeah, thank you. Massive shout out to the team. I feel like we really did a cool job on those pieces or those levels. Cool. Let's continue here to look at Evelyn's work. There was this little bit here where you have some drawings, which is cool, but it just feels like it was like a little bit out of place. So I had the idea of like maybe trying to move it in closer and then have like vertical framing. Like I'm thinking about like typical like phone screen or something like that. You can have it like kind of framed vertically. Maybe? But I think it's more like an optional thing. So yeah, those are the things that I wanted to add. It's really small stuff. I know that you want to round this off as well. I think it's also ready to be finished. So great stuff. Play around with the presentation, with the formatting, do a little bit of post-processing. Yeah, good stuff, Evelyn. Came together really nicely. Do you have experience with working with 3D monitors or 3D glasses? It's always awkward to work on 3D models in 2D space of a monitor. I love stereoscope. No, because my left eye is fucked. So 3D glasses and all that kind of stuff have never really worked on me. Yeah, I don't feel like I've ever truly experienced, this is gonna sound so weird, I've not ever experienced proper 3D through 3D glasses. Even though we had like the gimmicky like red and blue glasses back in the day, and I've tried like VR, that is probably the closest to like actually being in 3D, but I don't mind. I mean, I've been, take it from a person who's been working in like 2D on like 3D stuff for the last 10 years. I'm gonna be a bit biased, right? Because I've never really tried like 3D monitors. I don't even know what that would even mean, honestly, which is weird to say. You'd think that I should know. For environment art in game design, what tools should I learn? I mean, there's a lot of tools that you'll have to learn. But if you want to start with the starter toolkit, start with Blender, learn Unreal. I think with those two, you're gonna be busy a while already. But then at a certain point, you have to texture and all that kind of stuff too. So you probably wanna expand to Substance Painter, which is a texturing tool that we use. Cool. Let's switch it over to some more feedback. Samsung Odyssey 3D is a glasses free 3D. It's based on built-in webcam eye tracking. Might not be the best in yours. Yeah, I would love to give it a try, but I feel like I might not get the full benefit. I would love to give it a try though. I'd love to give it a try. You're still, yeah. I would love to go to like a tech event and give it a try, honestly. External environments require more tools as well. Learning 3D now to add to the arsenal. Oh yeah, that's a thing that I've not. Has anyone tried modeling in VR? I have not tried modeling in. I have not used Instamat. I've used a bunch of other free tools, not for texturing, because honestly, I don't really do texturing all that much. Like I said before, I focus more on like the bigger stuff, right? So individually texturing assets is not something that I necessarily enjoy. So I try to find ways around it by using slidable or whatever. Is it good? Have you used it yourself? Always curious to learn about new tools. Right. So next up we have Dinant. Let's see. For Whip Wednesday, in case I forget tomorrow, here are my two questions. Is the scene getting too crowded? I like the bits and bobs, but it's starting to feel a bit much. I think honestly, where it starts to feel like a little bit much is just because the lighting still, right? If we compare it to the concept, which is on the right here, you can kind of see that it's clearly demarcated with like this area, and it creates like this nice separation between. You have the stuff on the right, you have the stuff, you know, where the way that the lighting is in your scene, it just creates more contrast between objects, and it doesn't have like the same sort of calming effect on the eyes, right? Because there's a lot of contrast. There's a lot of contrast. There's a lot of shape variation. Like there's just it feels really busy. Feels really busy. So yeah, that might be something to look at. Where if you can try to find lighting that's also done in a softer way, that's going to help a lot as well, because there's less contrast between light and dark values, right? Where you have your brightest values, and then you have something really dark, and then you have something bright, and then you have something really dark. There's a lot of switching happening, where here just really simplified the whole. So that's where you kind of have to do a lot of lighting work and see how you can replicate the same sort of feeling, right? And reduce the amount of contrast that you have in yours. A couple of quick tips is, well, one quick tip, I'll say, is try to widen. Oh, it's been a while since I used this myself. Your light basically has a source radius. Like widen that source radius, because that is gonna make the shadows more. I think it might. source radius or something like that. Yeah, source radius on your lights, and see if that gives you like way softer shadows, because that's going to help a lot as well. Because you kind of want to have that like nice softness going on in the scene. Cool, and that was question number 1. So question number 2 is a bit about art direction, which is probably also where Stranger kind of comes in as well. You could also add specular variation in the pans, so they do not look all flat. Yeah, I mean something like this, right? Like something. Do you have some of that going on here? I think honestly the biggest difference is that the light just hits it beautifully here, and you see like all the scratches and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that could definitely be something to look at as well. But I was gonna say, in terms of art direction, I think you might not be talking about art direction. I think you might be talking about consistency. Well, to be fair, they might be sort of interchangeable in this context. Now that I'm thinking about it, and yeah, potentially. I think what could definitely help is looking at the colors that you use in the scene, right? The colors and how saturated they are, and you know how intense they are, because again, looking at the concept here, all of them kind of have like a soft pastel kind of look to it, right? Very, very nice, very soft on the eyes, where the same can be said about the tiles in your scene, but then we do have like the harshness of like the brown and the green taken up like a lot of our attention again, trying to distract us, right? Where something that is more soft again can just like leave your eyes to. So I think what I would look at is softer, like a softer color palette. That is something to investigate, because that is already going to help a lot. And then also, yeah, think about like where you add a contrast, where maybe you don't want to add contrast, right? Like the wall in the back, super simple. Where even the study you have here, it does create texture, right? But texture can also be distracting for look at too. So be aware of that. It is literally, this is a good exercise to see if you change the color palette in your scene, like how does that have an effect. A quick tip here is if you just go into your texture source in Unreal, you can do a bunch of really quick adjustments inside of Unreal, where you can just test things on the fly. It's really quick to iterate that way. So that's what I would do. Yeah. Cool stuff. Thanks for the update, Dinant. Appreciate it. Best of luck. Let's see. Arya, thank you for the question. For modeling, which is the best approach? High poly and convert to low poly, or low poly to high poly? I would say high poly. It kind of depends, right? Like, if it was like more traditional workflows, it's probably quicker to do. So if you're talking about like subdivision modeling, which is like an older technique where you're really particular about like how you do your topology on your object, it would probably be quicker to do high poly and then remove some of the edges, and then you have your low poly, right? However, the way that I would prefer to do it right now is I would just make my low poly and then do something along the lines of, it kind of depends on what it is, right? That's why it's heavily context dependent. But let's say you're doing a hard surface object. You can literally make your low poly and then just put bevels on everything, or throw it into ZBrush and then do like bevels, add topology, and then polish it, something like that. I'm going quickly over like the whole thing, but it kind of does depend on the object that you're trying to recreate. For example, I know a lot of weapon artists that do it that way, where they will create the weapon in low poly, and uh then they will take it into ZBrush and do like the polish workflow. Low to high is silhouette locked. Most people don't realize that. Oh, well, yeah, but other way around as well, right? Like, if you're gonna change your high, then yeah, if you distill your high, well, if you distill your low poly from your high poly, then I guess that helps there as well. It's harder to replicate the silhouette when doing low to high. Yeah. For me, starting with the high is easier. You try to add horns and spikes to a low poly that doesn't exist. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. For me, starting with the high is easier. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's been a while since I had to do like unique assets, right? And it so heavily depends on what you want to do. For most stuff that I would do myself, I would probably start with the high poly too. But most of the stuff that I do leans more along like the natural spectrum, right? So I work a lot with like using displacement modifiers to then generate like high poly meshes, and use like a display, not displacement. Fuck, I can't think about it. A decimate modifier to then reduce it down to a low poly that's usable. Right, so that's usually the way that I do it. But then if you're doing something that's more technical, I would say, or like hard surfacey, the opposite way around is probably the way. Is baking normals from high to low poly sculpt still the go-to technique for low spec games? No, not necessarily. I mean, there's still a variation. So technically, the more lower spec your game is, the more critical it is that you have good ways of getting the most amount of work out of your resources, right? Because you're working towards a lower spec. So let's say if you bake a high to low poly asset, that is an asset that can be one case and one case only. So I would say in those cases, like, you usually work with like more flexible workflow. But there are just like assets that need to look really good that are really difficult to then replicate with like titleables and trim sheets and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say the high to low poly technique is still the go-to technique for stuff that needs to look really good and really unique. Anything else you can kind of get by with like doing titleables, or oh my god, titleables, trim sheets, second UV masks, blend mask, vertex painting, all that kind of stuff. So many techniques. But if you want to get something that looks really unique and is very varied in its data, then yeah, I would go for like high to low. Hey, Godoko, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate it. I see, that's why I've been doing for my trees, but rocks and titleable stuff might be better. Yeah. Well, so, man, game art is so complex. So, for a tree, for the trunk, you would probably use a titleable with unique things attached to it, right? So what we do with trees in some cases is that we have the transition going from like the floor to the trunk. That is unique. And then once you blend into the trunk, that's a titleable. And then that titleable is used to the branches and all that kind of stuff as well. And then the tree canopy and all that kind of stuff is baked onto an atlas that we then use to like scatter like all the branches and all that kind of stuff on top. That's usually how that works. even even with more modern pipelines, like say let's say nanite and nanite foliage, would still do it the same way. Um, yeah, probably the same way. The way that you're going to be constructing the tree is going to be different because it's highly likely that, well, the recommendation now is that you use PCG to scatter the branches on top of a trunk so that they're more, well, they're cheaper, right? Because you're instancing them. That means that you're reducing the amount of draw calls. Welcome to the Tech Podcast. There's so much stuff that goes into making any asset, like for any purpose, that it's fucking crazy sometimes. And it also keeps changing constantly, right? Because now, I mean, CD Projekt Red and Unreal, they did like a collaboration where they have like a new way of optimizing trees over like longer distances, where now they voxelize them instead of doing like the older method of breaking them down to a billboard that then switches between billboards depending on the viewing angle, right? So now we're voxelizing entire trees to render them from a distance, which is actually more performant than doing all that stuff. No more cards on trees. So there might still be cards, but there's no opacity map. So if you, for example, look at the remake that they did from Oblivion, they still use cards, but they use so much geometry on the cards now that they don't have an opacity map anymore. Yeah, it is fucking mental. Like you said yourself, right? Like polygons are almost free. Well, not necessarily free, but yeah. Most of the expense is definitely on the textures. Yeah, both in terms of like the sort of memory cost that you pay for it, and also in terms of the hardware space, right? No alphas, that's wild. Yeah, because alphas are super, like that is the real bottleneck of trees, right? Because you have to have so much alpha that like if you have like a forest, then then you're gonna have like multiple layers of alpha rendering behind each other, right? And that's gonna be super expensive. Because in a very non-techy way, I'll describe it as whenever you have alpha, it needs to render the pixel that is on the alpha and the pixel that's behind the alpha, right? So if you then have multiple layers, it has to do that exponentially for each. You said that they're doing it on voxels, no? Yeah, but that's only for far distance LODs, right? So at a certain point, they switch like your actual geometry tree to a voxelized version of that tree, and then that is going to be your far down LOD. Because at a certain point, like if you do it too quickly, you're still going to realize or recognize that it's going to be voxelized. Or you're probably going to need like such accurate like voxelization that it's probably not worth it, like the trade-off. And world position offset to those trees, and sheesh. Yeah. They did have world position offset to the voxelized trees as well, I think. Well, honestly, no, at that distance it doesn't matter, right? Because you're not going to see it anyway. Do you think if they integrate neural rendering to Unreal, will we shift to 8K textures? Well, we're already working with virtualized textures and virtualized geometry anyway, right? Like the bottleneck for textures is not necessarily how we render them, it's how we store them, right? Because a 4K texture is already really big. Let's say we then go to a game that uses 8K texturing. We're quadrupling the amount of actual storage memory that we need to be able to store all those textures. I think that is honestly the biggest bottleneck. That doesn't mean that you can't have a game with like 8K textures. We can do that now. You can easily do that now. But then you have to think about like how they're used, right? So there could be, if you have a game that is like pretty forgiving in its art style and you only need to have like a certain amount of core textures, then making the argument for like an 8K texture, that is, yeah, that is totally doable. Yeah, sort of like Stranger is saying, right? Like you could have 8K textures on trim sheets and like have them really shareable and all that kind of stuff. But if you have 200 8K textures, I don't know enough about neural rendering to know what that means, honestly. Is it just like, well, I'm not even gonna ask it. Like I was thinking about like, is it upscaling? Like super sampling? Something like that? Because then we kind of have to deal with like the visuals, right? Because also like if we really need 8K textures, then we shouldn't necessarily trust like anything to generate that detail for us, right? Or like we replicate that for us or something like I said, I'm not too aware of like neural rendering and all that kind of stuff, but yeah. I think the first question, if someone comes up and says like, "Hey, I'm gonna add an 8K texture," I will be asking why first, because in most cases, you don't need it, because that is always going to be the thing, right? Like with bigger worlds, even if you can use it, like there's no reason to, because we're not only rendering the world, right? We're also rendering like, well, also calculating all the logic. So yeah. Oh, getting a little error pop up. Hmm. Good still. Hmm. Anyway. You don't even need like 2K textures, to be honest. Like unless you're going to like RVT terrain, then okay. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the games that I've worked on, like a lot of the AAA stuff, like they use like 1 to 2K for most of the stuff that they create, right? So it's really doable. And especially now where we have so many workflows that like have more benefits, like like the layered material workflow, where you can just have you don't get the detail from like the actual texture size, but like the tiling of that, and then you just like add like RGB masking on top of it. Like that is way more powerful in my opinion than having like a dedicated like unique. Yeah, the future of games. We're always going to be constrained because I mean, yeah. There's always going to be constraints. They're just going to be different. And yeah, we're going up, and like tech out there is fucking crazy. But yeah, we've been talking about like 8K texture for a long time now, and well, even 4K. All right. Anyway, enough talking about like texture sizes. Let's round this off here. So let's do the last three. Let's start with Vatra first. So I'll be honest. This one. So Vatra was asking me. I'm still having difficulty with the lighting and overall composition. I also have difficulties giving feedback on this project, and I think it's because of the size. It's not necessarily because of the size of like where I think like there might be feedback, but it's just like it feels like we're trying to critique like 1,000 scenes in. So I end up having to be like very generic for the most part. But even if we focus on a single thing, there's still some rules that I kind of want to. So we'll try and do our best. I'm probably gonna keep it to couple of questions and suggestions, right? So I think we talked about this last time, but where you want us to look? So that would be the first question. And then the follow-up question immediately is why? Why do you want to pull my attention here? Because at this point, I don't really know why I'm being pulled all the way up. Like there's no payoff, right? Like there's no reward at the end of the tunnel, so to say. What's the payoff? Just asking that question will open like a bunch of follow-up questions. Like I just want to emphasize that like we need to make sure that we're focusing on something that is worthwhile, right? Next thing that I want to bring up is lighting is physical. So what I mean by that is you added a bunch of fill lights in here, right? Because we talked about it last time and we wanted to brighten up the space as well. But the issue is whenever you light a space up like this, it looks so unnatural. Oh, I think we had some struggles there for a minute. Feel free to type in the chat if you can still hear me. I don't know what's going on. Like we're having some issues. So let's see. Yeah, so the lighting is physical. Like any light that you put into your scene needs an object. Or needs to be done. Yeah, dropping out some, but it seems to be stable now. Honor. Or needs to be done by the sun or moon or something like that. Like a big directional light, right? If we can't find an object, then we need to be creative with how we're doing the lighting instead. So for this one, if we want to light up this whole space and we don't want to add like braziers or anything like that, then okay, let's see if we can add like sunlight in here. Right, because just adding lights is not going to really help the situation. Right. So same thing here as well, right? Like in this case, we have a physical source of light, right? But the light that it's casting down the mountain is white. Even though like this looks like a giant ball of like orange fire, right? So we have a disconnect between our physical source, which is orange, and like the light that is casting, right? Which makes the scene just look really weird because it feels like there's no way that we can, that looks real, right? And that's where references come in. So let's have a look. Volcano eruption. Of course, it's a bunch of AI images. That's awesome. Find a real one, please. I mean, yours is like super violent as well, like the eruption. But let's have a look here. So, right, look at like how the light looks in a comparison. and look at how the light source from here kind of like scatters down. Well, light source from here, I guess, kind of just like cascades down like lighting across the whole scene. Same thing here. Quick little breakdown. We have a fake light here. We have a fake light here. What is their purpose? Like, where's that light coming from? And if you have like fake lights that come in, like at least keep them consistent so that you could kind of feel like it's coming from the sun. Right? But that would be like a thing to really think about. So yeah, all lighting needs to be physical. So really think about that. And then also find like a lighting hierarchy. We want to go from focal point or like primary, secondary, tertiary, right? So, well, I'll make it simple. I'm going to basically go from like 1, 2. That means that this is going to be the brightest one. This is going to be second brightest. This is going to be barely visible. But there needs to be enough difference between those levels to kind of make it make sense. Otherwise, anything is going to be just the same sort of value, right? And we can see that here. All this that's in like basically this entire scene is all just the same intensity of light. So that means that there's also no hierarchy. Like, okay, where do you want us to look? It's like we're looking at this blob, right? And that's what we want to avoid. So thinking about the hierarchy. And honestly, if you're still having difficulties with the lighting and overall composition, focus on one scene and one scene only, and really try to get some sort of like benchmark, and really try to look at references, look at some lighting videos that we have, for example, on our scene, on our YouTube channel. We have like a couple of workshops that talked about lighting. Have a look at those and see how you need to construct lighting for your scene. Yeah, I hope that helps. But yeah, really focusing on one singular scene and trying to get that to a stage where you feel really happy with it and it feels like it's close to reality, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to replicate reality to a certain degree. Try to get it to a good stage and then learn, like take those learnings that you did from that one scene and replicate them on the rest of the you have. That's the way that I would do it. Otherwise, we're just gonna lose focus and we're just gonna try to do everything all at once. And I feel like that's where some of the chaos in the scene. Even though, after all this feedback, like the amount of, like I said last week as well, like the amount of like effort and like work and all that kind of stuff that goes into the scene is freaking awesome, right? Doing a great job. But yeah, it's really time to focus on the lighting and like how to present. Cool, Vatra. I hope that was helpful. This was probably the most difficult one to talk about because there is a lot of stuff that needs to happen to make it look really readable. So I hope this helps. Oh, you're in luck, Connor. So if you are interested in seeing a walkabout video for this environment, go through the thread that Vatra made because Vatra actually has a video. He actually has a video of him walking through the whole scene. It is an ambitious scene, yeah. And I think it's one of those classic tales where like the ambition gets in the way of finishing or like pushing something towards like final quality, right? Because the scope is so big and it's so overwhelming at this point that it's always a good idea to like scope down and focus on something and then take those learnings and spread them out again. Basically benchmarking, right? Cool, last two for today. Let's start with sleeper takes. And then do Power Tail. And so 2 questions. Yeah, unfortunately we didn't get to look at this like last week. But this is really cool. Let's have a look. Oh, sorry, Charlie. Did I miss you raise your hands in the beginning? Because we could have done you like way earlier. Cool. But currently working on a series of stylized trees for an indie game. Think Breath of the Wild style with themes of Elden Ring. We got a few different reference pics. Yeah, we got the reference pics on the right, which look really nice. Cool. Let's see. So the question that you have is, do you think having this many glowing lights in the background for a background tree will impact the performance? I've got a point light inside the tree giving off a soft glow with no shadows. Soft. It would be cool to see the setup, but if you have, I've also got a point light inside the tree giving a soft glow. So for lighting purposes, that's probably not the best idea because you're gonna restrict like what lighting can do. Right? So so a soft light per tree is probably not gonna be needed. Because you kind of want to tackle the scene lighting from a bigger perspective, right? Hello, stranger, and bye-bye, stranger. Got the bounce for the time being. I will catch the replay as always. Thank you for the stream. Really enjoyable and yeah. Thank you for being here as well, and thank you for pitching in too. I think Ori and the Blind Forest was another preference for foliage I was given. Yeah, it's cool. So yeah, one soft light per tree is probably not going to be needed. If you have individual lights for these guys here, that might also be a concern because you're going to end up with a lot of lights. But it honestly depends on the tech that you're using. So the question that you're trying to answer here is something that you have to answer by looking at the scene at large. Because what you're going to find is it heavily depends on the amount of them that are going to be in the scene, the amount of lights that you're going to have, the attenuation radius, like how quick you call them out, like all that kind of stuff is going to influence like if you can have them and if you even need them in the scene. Because also like you have to look at like an actual you have to look at actual scene performance. That's the only way that you can test stuff. Because from that you can draw conclusions of like, oh shit, like this is tanking the performance really bad. Okay, now I need to replace the individual lights and we have again go back to that one soft light per tree. Try that. There's only one way to find out, and that is doing it in an actual. Do you think the scale of the trees feels off? Yeah, 100%. I mean, you got the character here, right? Like if that is like a full size tree. Compare that to like lifelike character, like that tree is like 1.8 meters. That is like pretty small for the tree, especially a tree that's like this dense with its canopy, that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I think it's a lot of our first project, so I'm doing this alongside other environments doing the block out. Yeah, that's fine. But like you can still do some performance testing on your end, right? Because you need to have an idea of what a full forest is going to look like, and then try to get the sort of like desired density that you need and then see if that runs at performance level, right? So that's why I'm saying, like, usually you just have like a scene set up that tries to, you're trying to mimic, you're trying to mimic the actual, like a game example. Yeah, you can just have like a little area where you just say like, hey, I'm just gonna scatter a bunch with like the density that I think would be good for our game, and then see if you run into issues with the amount of light, which you probably will, but there are options that you can toggle to lessen the impact of it. Because you have something called mega lights now, which can definitely help in this situation. But there's it all depends on the use case of the game that you're making. So you need to have some way of testing, like, hey, is this actually going to be shippable, right? Because that's the whole point behind this. When it comes to the scale of it, I would definitely scale this up. We like between like two or three. If you're going for fairly low to mid specs, well, then you're not going to have much lights. Yeah, because also what you need to think about, and this is why testing is important, you're going to be scattering. Let's be very, if you want to make like a forest, let's say you scatter 100 of these, right? Let's keep the number really low, right? And let's say you need them all to be lit up, then you're gonna have like 600 point lights. Well, let's say 1,000, make it like an equal number, right? Between like 700 and 1,000 point lights that are all gonna be doing lighting calculation. Even if you disable like the shadow distance, that kind of stuff. That's a lot. So that is what I mean by when I said earlier benchmarking. This is what you have to do. You kind of need to run like test scenarios at the spec that you want to release at to see if it's even feasible. Especially if you're doing like a production. And the second thing, the second question that you were asking is, how do you approach making foliage that looks good but doesn't distract from the player? How would that differ from the hero tree? So the other trees kind of look just more generic, right? But generic can take like very like many forms. Where let's say, for example, the shape of this tree kind of just like, okay, you kind of have like this sort of thing going, right? Whereas like your hero tree is gonna have like more separation and more layers to it. I know that I'm scribbling down, but... And then if you combine like the more simple looking ones, where they have like a more simplified silhouette, next to the ones that have like a more complicated silhouette, that's already gonna help with like the readability between the two. So that is one way to do it. A really quick one is to do scale, right? So this guy, well, let me do a simplification. So right? See what I mean? This little sketch that I just did is like, okay, it's really clear, you know? Really clear which is going to be the hero tree and which is going to be like the the generic tree, right? This big guy over here, definitely going to be the hero, right? Because he takes up like the majority of the space. But that is a very simple way of just having a difference between objects. That is a simple way. You can also do it with color, right? So if you have a forest of like blue trees, having a green tree in the middle of it, or having dead trees versus like an alive one, like there's so many ways. We're basically just we're thinking about contrast, but in like the broadest sense, right? So that contrast can be between man-made, natural, can be between red and can be between small and big. You know, so there's so many ways that you can make something stand out. But when it comes to, yeah, I mean, they could all apply to like foliage. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. But yeah, really cool stuff though. I really like the colors. Really like the colors. Really like the shape already. So doing some good stuff. Like it. Saturation, colors, values, detail, light, composition, etc. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe not the case for composition, right? Because no matter how you're gonna compose the scene, no matter how you're gonna well, no matter how you're gonna compose the scene, you want the hero tree to always stand out, right? Because what happens is that you, in most cases, as like a game developer, give away control over the camera to the person, right? So they have full control of it. So you don't really control the comp. Hey Slade, thanks for sitting in. Thanks for being here until almost the end. Appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, cool. Thanks for showcasing your work, Sleeper Six. This is cool shit. I like it. Yeah, best of luck to you and the rest of the team as well. And then last but not least, we got Alejandro here. So 2 questions. The first one is the bar making sense? Because the bar kind of feels like it's too clean or too polished right now. So I got like straight out the gate, I got a question. What are your references for the bar, right? It is really important to have a look at references. But if I were to distill it down to like if you want to make something look like it's built from scraps, right? That means that there's no straight lines, there's a mixture of materials, and there's signs of disrepair as well. I think those two, they kind of go into hand in hand. But those 3 things like are just really good like rule set for if you want to make something look like it's made from scraps, right? So for example, we can see here from the Philippines, like a slum in the Philippines. You can tell, you know, this is just cobbled together, handmade stuff. Nothing looks the same. Everything is kind of wonky. It has like a ton of different materials. It's chaos, right? It is chaos. But that is a way to make things feel like they're cobbled together. Same thing here. This is in Berlin. They kind of turned like an old CIA base. They kind of repurposed it, and it's now like an artist retreat. But even here, you can kind of see like it's a bit more subtle. It's also abandoned. You can tell that they still try to make something out of it, right? They try to make a bar out of it. You can tell there's no straight lines. Everything is kind of, it has like little post-its and little stickers everywhere, but it has a lot of chaos. So I would look at some more references to see how you can recreate more of that. Because I did some draw overs like a couple of weeks ago. They might be worth revisiting where I talked about like how to get the silhouette of the bar to look interesting. And then the second question is, how is the first lighting path? Very rough, but the idea is, I mean, honestly, that is all you need, right? So The lighting pass will do for now. That's what I noted down. But just watch out for the amount of colors though, because you have a lot of different colors already going on. And it kind of just feels like it's just crazy town for no purpose. So I would be careful about that. But like I said, lighting pass will do for now. I think there's bigger things. Yeah. Good stuff. Nice update. I like where this is going. So keep it up, man. Then we're gonna switch it on over because it's getting late. So we're gonna do like a final question here. Thank you for asking the questions, Arya. In Elden Ring, how do they make the tree a glowing tree? That's actually pretty simple. It's done by using emissive. So emissive is basically a texture that we can add to an object that basically says if it's gonna be emitting color. So it's pretty simple. So in that case, they just had like the textures from the tree. They had like an emissive part, which meant that they actually cast out light into its environment. Probably, usually in most cases, that is also supported by actual having a physical light in the scene as well, because they work really well hand in hand. But yeah, that is usually how you make things look as if they are shining a light. This is very common, very typical. It's going to be even more common now because Lumen kind of is really good at feeding that into the lighting system. Is it much more performant than dedicated lights? Yes, it is. But what is gonna happen is that the strength of the light is gonna be decided by the intensity of the emissive and also how big the object is. So you're gonna be restricted by the size of that object, or else you're gonna have to compensate by making it really bright, which is then gonna blow out your emissive at a certain point. So that is kind of like the counterpoint, like how to do it. I don't know what the actual performance difference would be necessarily, like if you have a lot of emissive going on, but I just know that it's definitely going to be more performant than having dedicated light. We also have to use indirect light. Yep. Yeah. It's it's a lot of stuff. You usually want to have a combination of like all the things and then tweak them to your needs, right? So like using a directional light and using a skylight and using your exponential height, and then going in with like dedicated lights where you need, and then maybe going with emissive in other places. Like you're using all the techniques that are available, but you just have to balance them in a way where it makes sense for the purpose of their usage. Yeah. Okay, people, it's time for me to head on out. It was a pleasure hanging out with all of you. I wish you all a nice evening. And yeah, if you want to join up, you know how to do so. There's a link down in the comments. But yeah, thank you so much for all the questions this evening. And then we'll see each other next week. Bye-bye.